The winter of 1944 wrapped the forests of Belgium in thick white silence. Snow rested heavily on broken fences, frozen roads, and abandoned farmhouses. The distant sound of artillery rolled across the hills like slow thunder, reminding every soldier that the war was far from over. The Allied forces were advancing, but the German army still fought fiercely, defending every mile of land. Inside a ruined farmhouse near the front line, a small group of American soldiers gathered around a wooden table lit by a flickering oil lamp. Maps were spread across the surface, marked with red circles and handwritten notes. The air smelled of damp wood, oil, and cold metal. Captain Daniel Moss stood at the head of the table. He was in his mid-30s, his face lined with exhaustion and responsibility. He had led many missions, but this one carried special importance. "Listen carefully," Moore said, tapping the map with his finger. "Enemy tanks have been stopping our advance for days. Intelligence confirms that their fuel comes from a hidden depot located here, deep inside the forest near the old railway line. If we destroy that fuel depot, their armored units will be powerless for at least several days." The soldiers leaned closer, studying the map. Lieutenant Harris added, "The depot is guarded, but not heavily. The Germans believe the forest protects it naturally. Our job is to sneak in, plant explosives, and get out before they realize what happened." Private Ethan Cole stood quietly at the edge of the room, listening carefully. He was only 19 years old, fresh from training camp. His uniform still looked new compared to the worn clothing of the veterans around him. His hands tightened around his rifle strap as he imagined what lay ahead. This would be his first real combat mission. Sergeant Walker noticed Ethan's nervous expression. Walker was tall, strong, and calm, a soldier who had survived North Africa and Italy before coming to Europe. He gave Ethan a reassuring nod. "Stick close to me, kid. You'll be fine." Moore continued, "We move out at 2,100 hours. Weather will help us. Snow and low visibility will reduce enemy sight lines. Silence is critical. No unnecessary firing. Surprise is our biggest advantage." The men nodded. Each understood the risks. As darkness fell, the squad prepared their equipment. Rifles were cleaned, ammunition checked, knives sharpened. Radios were tested. Small explosive charges were carefully packed into canvas bags. Everyone dressed in white camouflage cloaks to blend with the snowy environment. Ethan checked his rifle again and again, feeling his heart beat faster with each passing minute. He remembered his father's words before he left home: "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it." Ethan repeated those words silently. At exactly 2,100 hours, the squad moved out. The forest swallowed them in shadow. Tall pine trees blocked moonlight, and the ground crunched softly beneath their boots. Breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. The only sounds were the wind and the distant echo of gunfire far away. Sergeant Walker led the way, signaling silently with hand gestures. The squad moved in a tight formation, keeping distance but maintaining visual contact. Ethan followed closely behind Walker, copying his careful steps. After nearly an hour of slow movement, Walker raised his fist. "Stop." Two German guards stood ahead near a wire fence, smoking cigarettes and laughing quietly. Their rifles leaned against the fence. Captain Moore crouched and observed. He signaled for a silent takedown. Walker and Lieutenant Harris crept forward from opposite sides. In one smooth motion, they grabbed the guards, covering their mouths and pulling them into the snow. The guards struggled briefly, but were quickly restrained and tied. No alarms. No shots. Ethan watched with amazement. The operation felt unreal, like a movie, yet dangerously real. The squad moved past the fence and deeper into the forest. Soon, a faint glow appeared through the trees. The fuel depot came into view. Large metal fuel tanks stood hidden among the trees, covered with camouflage nets and snow. A small wooden guard shack sat nearby. A truck was parked beside the tanks. 3 German soldiers walked slowly on patrol, their boots crunching on frozen ground. Moss studied the scene through binoculars. "We split into 2 teams. Alpha will distract the patrol. Bravo will plant explosives on the tanks." Walker led Bravo. Ethan stayed close behind him. Alpha quietly tossed a small rock toward the far side of a clearing. The sound drew 2 guards away. The remaining guards stayed near the shack, stamping his feet to stay warm. Walker moved silently behind the guard and knocked him unconscious with the butt of his rifle. Ethan helped drag the body behind the shack. Bravo rushed to the fuel tanks. Walker and another soldier began attaching explosive charges carefully to the metal surface. Ethan stood watch, scanning the dark forest for movement. His hands shook slightly, but he forced himself to stay focused. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the trees. A German patrol had discovered the tide guards. Alarm! A voice shouted in German. Gunfire erupted. Bullets snapped through branches and struck metal tanks with sharp clangs. The quiet forest exploded into chaos. Charges set. Fall back. Walker yelled. Moore fired his rifle toward the enemy to cover the retreat. Alpha Team sprinted back toward the forest path. Ethan ran beside Walker, his lungs burning from cold air and fear. Behind them, the explosives detonated. A massive explosion lit up the night sky. Flames shot upward as the fuel tanks erupted, sending black smoke into the air. The ground shook violently. Heat washed over the squad even from a distance. The fuel depot was destroyed. But their escape had just begun. German soldiers fired wildly toward the forest. Tracer rounds cut through darkness. Ethan heard bullets strike trees around him. He ducked and kept running. Walker suddenly stumbled. A bullet had struck his leg. Ethan grabbed him instinctively. I've got you, Sergeant. Walker grimaced but forced himself to keep moving. Don't stop, kid. Keep moving. The squad regrouped deeper in the forest, using trees as cover. More quickly assessed the situation. We head north toward the frozen river. If we cross it, vehicles can't follow easily. The men moved fast despite exhaustion. Snow soaked their boots, and icy wind burned their faces. The sound of engines grew louder behind them. German trucks were coming. Ethan felt fear tighten his chest, but he supported Walker, refusing to leave him behind. Each step felt heavier than the last. The frozen river finally appeared through the trees, a wide stretch of ice reflecting moonlight. They had reached the next stage of survival. But the enemy was close, and danger still waited ahead. The frozen river stretched wide before the squad like a sheet of broken glass, glowing faintly under the pale moonlight. A thin mist floated above the ice, swirling slowly in the icy wind. The forest behind them echoed with distant engine noise and scattered gunfire. The Germans were closing in. Captain Moore raised his hand, signaling the squad to slow down. Everyone gathered near the riverbank, breathing heavily. Frost clung to their eyebrows and scarves. Sergeant Walker leaned heavily on Ethan's shoulder, his face pale from pain and blood loss. We have to cross, Moore said quietly but firmly. If those trucks reach the riverbank, we'll be trapped. Lieutenant Harris examined the ice. He tapped it cautiously with the butt of his rifle. A dull, solid sound echoed. Looks thick enough, he said. But spread out. If the ice cracks, we don't want everyone going down together. One by one, the soldiers stepped onto the frozen surface. Their boots slipped slightly as they moved carefully forward. The ice groaned softly under their weight, sending nervous chills through the group. Ethan kept his eyes on Walker, holding his arm tightly. Every step was slow and controlled. Walker clenched his jaw, refusing to complain. Behind them, headlights flashed between the trees. They are almost here, someone whispered. Halfway across the river, a loud crack echoed beneath their feet. Ethan froze. The ice splintered slightly near the edge, water bubbling up through a thin crack. The squad increased their pace carefully, resisting the urge to run. Panic would only make things worse. Finally, boots touched solid ground on the far bank. Everyone exhaled in relief. Moments later, German trucks reached the riverbank. Headlights swept across the ice. Soldiers shouted orders in German. A few shots rang out, but the distance and darkness made accuracy impossible. The vehicle stopped. The ice was too dangerous for heavy trucks to cross. Moore smiled briefly. Good. That buys us time. The squad moved quickly into a cluster of abandoned farm buildings hidden among trees. A large wooden barn stood slightly tilted, its roof partially collapsed from age and weather. Inside the barn, darkness and silence surrounded them. Dust floated in the air. The smell of old hay and damp wood filled their lungs. Moore ordered a short rest. Walker's wound needed attention. Lieutenant Harris and Ethan carefully helped Walker sit against a wooden beam. Harris pulled out a medical kit and cut away the torn fabric around Walker's leg. Blood had soaked through his trousers. Bullet went clean through, Harris said after examining the wound. Painful, but not fatal. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic and wrapped it tightly with bandages. Walker clenched his fist during the process, but remained silent. Ethan watched closely, learning what real battlefield care looked like. "You did good back there," Walker told Ethan quietly. "Didn't hesitate." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. His heart was still racing. Outside, German voices echoed faintly across the river. Searchlights swept the trees. The enemy had not given up. Moore gathered the squad for a quick briefing. "We rest for 1 hour. Then we move southeast toward the ruined village. We'll try to make radio contact there and request extraction." The men took turns keeping watch while others rested briefly. Some leaned against wooden walls and closed their eyes. Others cleaned weapons or checked ammunition. Ethan sat near the barn door, watching the moonlight reflect off the snow. His mind replayed the explosion, the gunfire, Walker's injury. Fear mixed with excitement and disbelief. He realized how close death had come, and how easily it could return. After an hour, the squad moved again. The forest grew thicker as they advanced. Snow began falling lightly, covering their tracks, a small blessing. They avoided main paths and moved through uneven terrain, climbing over fallen trees and frozen bushes. Every sound felt amplified in the silent night. Suddenly, a distant shout echoed behind them. German patrols were crossing the river, on foot. "They are persistent," Harris muttered. Moore increased the pace. Walker struggled but refused to slow the squad. Ethan continued supporting him. Just before dawn, the outline of a ruined village appeared ahead. Broken stone walls, collapsed roofs, and blackened chimneys stood like skeletons against the gray sky. "This place was bombed months ago," Moore whispered. "No civilians should be here." The squad entered cautiously, weapons raised. They searched several buildings and found no movement. Wind whistled through shattered windows. Snow drifted into empty rooms. Moore selected a partially intact house as a temporary hideout. From the second floor, they could observe the surrounding area. Harris set up the radio and attempted to contact Allied command. Static crackled. "Command, this is Echo Squad. Requesting extraction. Repeat, requesting extraction." No response. He adjusted the frequency and tried again. Nothing. "Signal's weak," Harris said. "Maybe the antenna is damaged." They tried repositioning the radio near window, raising the antenna higher. Still no clear signal. Moore frowned. "We'll try again later." Suddenly, Sergeant Lewis, who was on lookout, whispered urgently. Movement at the edge of the village. Through broken walls, they saw German soldiers entering the far end of the village, moving carefully between buildings. "They tracked us," Ethan whispered. Moore made a quick decision. "Everyone stay silent. We hold here unless discovered." The squad took defensive positions behind broken walls and furniture. Footsteps echoed closer. A German soldier entered a nearby building, his flashlight cutting through dust-filled air. His shadow moved across the wall. The tension was unbearable. Ethan felt sweat under his helmet despite the cold. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. The soldier stepped closer. A wooden board creaked under his boot. He froze, listening. The soldier raised his rifle. Time felt frozen. Suddenly, the soldier turned away, calling to his squad outside. He exited the building. The Americans remained motionless, hardly breathing. Minutes passed like hours. The German patrol slowly moved through the village, searching but missing the hidden squad by meters. Eventually, the voices faded. Relief washed over everyone, but no one relaxed completely. "They'll be back," Moore said quietly. "We need that radio working." Harris nodded. "I'll keep trying." The sun slowly began to rise, casting pale light over the ruined village. The squad had survived another night. But the enemy was still close, and rescue was not yet guaranteed. Morning light crept slowly over the ruined village, revealing broken stone walls, shattered rooftops, and frozen streets buried under thin snow. Smoke from distant battles drifted faintly across the gray sky. The silence felt heavy, as if the village itself remembered the violence that once tore through it. Inside the partially collapsed house, Echo Squad remained hidden and alert. No one had slept properly. Faces were tired, eyes red from strain. Sergeant Walker lay against a wall, his injured leg elevated on a pile of folded cloth. Though the bleeding had slowed, pain still carved deep lines across his face. Lieutenant Harris worked quietly on the radio, adjusting wires and tapping the cracked casing gently. Static hissed again and again, mocking his efforts. "Come on, work," he muttered. Captain Moss stood near a broken window, scanning the empty street through binoculars. Snowflakes drifted lazily, covering old footprints and shell marks. Ethan sat nearby, cleaning his rifle with slow, careful movements. His hands were steadier than before. Fear still lived in his chest, but something inside him had hardened. He had crossed a line from boyhood into something heavier: responsibility, survival, and loyalty. Suddenly, the radio crackled. "Echo, this is Allied Forward Command." Harris froze. His eyes widened. He adjusted the dial carefully. "Forward Command, this is Echo Squad. We copy you, weak but readable." Static burst loudly, then a voice returned. "Echo Squad, your signal is unstable. Report status." Moore rushed to the radio. "Mission successful. Fuel depot destroyed. We have one wounded. Request extraction." A pause followed. The radio buzzed with interference. "Echo Squad, standby. Extraction window pending. Weather interference." The signal faded into static. Harris slammed his fist lightly against the floor. Signal dropped again. Moore sighed slowly. "At least they know we're alive." Suddenly, Sergeant Lewis whispered urgently from his lookout position. "Movement, multiple units entering the village." Moore raised his binoculars. German soldiers were advancing from two directions, spreading carefully between buildings. Their formation was organized, not random patrols. They were hunting. "They are sweeping the village," Moore said quietly. "We're running out of hiding places." The squad tightened their positions. Ammunition was counted. Only limited supplies remained. Walker struggled to sit up. "If they get close, I'll slow you down." Moss shook his head firmly. "No one gets left behind." Walker met Moore's eyes and nodded silently, understanding the unspoken bond. The German soldiers moved closer. Boots crunched against snow and stone. Voices echoed between empty walls. A door slammed nearby. Ethan pressed his back against the cold wall, his breathing shallow. Every sound seemed amplified: the rustle of cloth, the click of metal, the distant wind. One German soldier entered the building across the street, peering through shattered windows. Another followed, scanning doorways with his rifle raised. "They are tightening the net," Harris whispered. Moore made a quick decision. "We move through the underground tunnel." Ethan's eyes widened. "Tunnel." Lewis nodded. "Found it earlier. Old cellar passage connecting to the church ruins." The squad moved quietly toward the rear of the building. Beneath a collapsed staircase, Lewis lifted a loose wooden panel, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel entrance. Cold, damp air flowed upward, carrying the smell of earth and mold. One at a time, Moore ordered. Walker was carefully lowered into the tunnel first, supported by Harris and Ethan. The passage was tight, forcing them to crouch low. The floor was muddy and uneven. Behind them, German voices echoed closer. The tunnel stretched long and twisting, barely lit by small flashlights. Water dripped from the ceiling. Rats scattered at the sound of boots. After several tense minutes, faint daylight appeared ahead. They emerged inside the ruins of an old stone church. The roof had collapsed long ago, leaving broken pillars and snow-covered pews. Moore signaled everyone to spread out quietly. From behind the cracked altar, they could see the village square. German soldiers were now everywhere, searching buildings, checking footprints, calling to each other. Their numbers had doubled. "They'll find the tunnel eventually," Harris whispered. "We need to move." Moore studied the surroundings. Beyond the church lay open fields leading toward a forest ridge. If they could reach the trees, they might escape. But the field offered no cover. Moore turned to the squad. "We wait for low visibility, smoke or snow, then cross fast." As if answering his wish, dark clouds thickened overhead. Snowfall intensified, reducing visibility. Now, more whispered. The squad moved carefully out of the church ruins and into the open field, staying low and spaced apart. Snow whipped against their faces, blurring vision. Wind howled, masking footsteps. Halfway across the field, a German voice shouted. A soldier had spotted movement. Gunfire erupted. Bullets cut through the snow-filled air. Dirt and ice sprayed near their boots. Run! More shouted. The squad sprinted toward the forest line. Walker stumbled, nearly falling. Ethan grabbed him, pulling with all his strength. A bullet struck the ground inches from Ethan's foot. Fear surged, but so did determination. They reached the trees and dug behind thick trunks. The Germans fired blindly into the forest, but hesitated to pursue in low visibility. Silence slowly returned. Breathing hard, the squad regrouped. They had escaped again, narrowly. But Walker's condition worsened. Blood seeped through the bandage again. Harris examined the wound. He needs proper medical care soon. Moore nodded grimly. We must get extraction today. Harris tried the radio again. Static. Then a faint voice. Echo Squad. Coordinates received. Extraction at grid point Delta 7. 2 hours. Moore smiled with relief. You heard that, men? We're getting out. Hope spread through tired faces. But danger still remained. 2 hours in enemy territory felt like a lifetime. They had to survive just a little longer. The forest grew darker as thick clouds swallowed the weak winter sunlight. Snow continued falling, blanketing the ground and muffling distant sounds. Echo Squad moved cautiously toward grid point Delta 7, the designated extraction zone. Each step felt heavier than the last. Exhaustion weighed on their bodies, and tension filled the cold air. Sergeant Walker's condition worsened. His breathing became shallow, and his face turned pale. Ethan and Lieutenant Harris supported him from both sides, moving slowly through the uneven forest floor. Almost there, Sergeant, Ethan whispered, though he wasn't sure if Walker could hear him clearly. Walker forced a faint smile. Yo, doing fine, kid. Captain Moss studied the map while walking. Extraction zone is near an old logging clearing, he said quietly. Open area. That means visibility for us and the enemy. The squad tightened formation. As they approached the clearing, distant engine noise echoed through the trees. Moore raised his fist. Halt. German vehicles. 2 armored trucks appeared on the far side of the clearing, moving cautiously between trees. Soldiers jumped down, spreading outward in a sweeping pattern. They are cutting us off, Harris whispered. Moore scanned quickly. We take defensive positions inside the stone cabin. A small abandoned hunting cabin stood near the edge of the clearing. Its stone walls offered limited protection. The squad rushed inside just as the first shots rang out. Bullets slammed into the walls, sending stone dust into the air. Windows shattered. The cabin echoed with sharp cracks of rifle fire. Positions. Moore shouted. Lewis and Harris took the left window. Moore and Ethan covered the doorway. Walker lay against the rear wall, barely conscious. German soldiers advanced cautiously, using trees for cover. Ethan fired controlled bursts, remembering his training. His hands were steady now. Fear had transformed into focus. A German grenade landed near the cabin door. Grenade! Moore shouted. Everyone dropped. The explosion shook the building, blasting snow and debris inside. Ears rang. Dust filled the air. The cabin held, barely. They are testing us, Harris said. They'll rush soon. Moore checked ammunition. Supplies were dangerously low. Outside, German soldiers shouted orders. Suddenly, a heavy machine gun opened fire from behind a fallen log. Bullets chewed into the stone wall, cracking pieces off. We can't stay here long. Lewis yelled. Moore considered their options quickly. Retreat into the forest would expose them to open fire. The cabin was their only temporary shield. Hold until air support arrives, Moore said firmly. Extraction is close. Minutes passed like hours. Walker groaned softly. Ethan knelt beside him. Hang on, Sergeant. Help is coming. Walker opened his eyes weakly. You've become a soldier today. Those words struck Ethan deeply. Gunfire intensified. A German squad attempted to flank the cabin from the right side. Moss spotted them moving through the trees. Right side. Lewis, cover them. Lewis fired a grenade launcher round, forcing the attackers back temporarily. Another explosion rocked the clearing as German soldiers returned fire. The cabin's walls cracked further. Small holes allowed cold air and snow to pour inside. A sudden silence followed. Too quiet. "They are regrouping," Harris whispered. "Preparing a push." Mock clenched his jaw. "We hold." Seconds later, enemy soldiers rushed forward, shouting. Ethan fired rapidly, hitting one attacker who fell into the snow. Another soldier took his place immediately. Lewis was hit in the shoulder and fell back with a cry. Harris dragged him behind cover and applied pressure to stop the bleeding. Still breathing. Harris shouted. The fight grew desperate. Moore fired his last magazine. Only a few bullets remained among the squad. Just as the Germans prepared another charge, a distant roar filled the sky. Aircraft engines. Ethan looked up through the shattered roof. 3 Allied fighter planes screamed overhead, diving toward the clearing. Rockets launched. Explosions erupted among the German positions. Trees snapped, snow blasted into the air, and enemy soldiers scattered in panic. The machine gun fell silent. German trucks reversed rapidly, retreating into the forest. The battlefield grew quiet except for ringing ears and drifting smoke. The squad stared in disbelief. Ma laughed softly in relief. "That's our ride." Minutes later, 2 Allied transport trucks arrived cautiously at the edge of the clearing. Medics jumped out with stretchers. Walker and Lewis were quickly loaded and treated. A radio operator signaled thumbs up. Extraction secured. Ethan collapsed onto a crate, exhausted. His whole body shook from adrenaline release. Moore placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You did good, soldier." As the trucks moved away from the battlefield, Ethan looked back at the clearing, broken trees, smoke, and scattered snow, the final echo of their survival. But their journey was not yet over. The war still waited, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. The transport truck bounced along the frozen dirt road, its engine humming steadily as it carried Echo Squad away from the battlefield. Snow-covered trees blurred past on both sides. Inside the open truck bed, the soldiers sat quietly, wrapped in blankets, their faces pale with exhaustion and relief. For the first time in days, no bullets flew. No alarm screamed. Only the sound of the wind and the engine remained. Ethan sat near the side of the truck, staring at his gloved hands. They still trembled slightly. His mind replayed every moment: the explosion at the fuel depot, Walker's injury, the frozen river, the ruined village, the final firefight. It felt like weeks had passed, not days. Sergeant Walker lay on a stretcher near the front of the truck, receiving continuous medical attention. His face was weak but calm. Occasionally, he opened his eyes and glanced toward Ethan, offering a faint smile. "You'll be walking again soon," Ethan said quietly, leaning closer so the wind wouldn't steal his words. Walker nodded slowly. "Guess. I'll owe you a race someday." Ethan smiled for the first time since the mission began. Lewis, wounded in the shoulder, sat upright beside a medic. He winced as bandages were tightened, but remained conscious. "I better get a medal for this," he joked weakly. Harris chuckled softly. "You'll get a scar and a story. That's the real prize." The truck passed through friendly checkpoints and finally rolled into the Allied base camp just before dusk. Tents stretched across snowy fields. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the evening sky. Soldiers moved about, preparing equipment and supplies. As the truck stopped, medics rushed forward to transfer the wounded to the medical tents. Walker squeezed Ethan's hand briefly before being carried away. "Proud of you," he whispered. Those 2 words stayed with Ethan. Echo Squad gathered near the command tent, still bundled in blankets. Captain Moore approached them with a tired but satisfied expression. "You completed your mission under extreme conditions," Moore said. "The destruction of the fuel depot crippled enemy armor in this sector. Our advance has already resumed." The men exchanged quiet looks of pride. "Rest tonight," Moore added. "You've earned it." Later that evening, Ethan sat alone on a wooden crate outside his tent, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The sky glowed orange and purple, reflecting off the snow. For a brief moment, the world felt peaceful, a rare gift during war. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. It was something his mother had given him before he left home. Ethan began writing. Today I learned what fear truly feels like. I learned what courage really means. It's not being fearless. It's standing when everything inside you wants to run. I saw men risk their lives for each other. I became part of something larger than myself. He paused, listening to distant laughter from nearby tents. If I survive this war, I will never forget the faces of those who stood beside me. The following morning, Ethan visited the medical tent. Walker lay awake, his leg heavily bandaged but stable. "Doc says I'll walk with a limp for a while," Walker said. "Better than not walking at all." "You'll recover," Ethan replied confidently. Walker studied Ethan carefully. "You handled pressure better than most veterans. War changes people, but don't let it steal your heart." Ethan nodded silently, understanding the weight of those words. Days passed. News spread through the camp that the German tank units had been forced to retreat due to fuel shortages. Allied forces gained ground rapidly. Operation Last Hope had contributed directly to saving hundreds of lives. Echo Squad received commendations for bravery and successful completion of their mission. But celebration felt quiet and respectful. The cost of war was never far from their minds. One evening, the squad gathered around a small fire. Lewis strummed a borrowed guitar softly. Someone brewed coffee in a metal cup. Laughter mixed with tired sighs. For a moment, they felt human again, not just soldiers. Ethan looked at the flames dancing upward and realized how deeply he had changed. He was no longer just a teenager chasing adventure. He understood responsibility, sacrifice, and brotherhood. Weeks later, winter began to loosen its grip. Snow slowly melted into muddy roads. The war continued pushing eastward. Before Echo Squad was reassigned, Ethan visited Walker one last time before he was transferred to a recovery unit. "You'll do great things after this war," Walker said. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Live a life worth surviving for." Ethan smiled. "I promise." As Ethan walked away from the medical tents, he looked toward the distant horizon, beyond the camp, beyond the battlefield, beyond the war itself. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew something powerful now lived inside him: courage, memory, and purpose. Operation Last Hope was over, but its lessons would stay forever.